Hey y'all, Rick Sky here. Welcome back to another Timepieces for Tomorrow video. And within this video, I want to address a question from many viewers. And by the way, thank y'all all for this question and other questions you've had as well. And please comment within this video's description, any of my videos, ask questions because I'll try to address those questions within upcoming Timepieces for Tomorrow videos. But before we continue with this, I want to show what's on the wrist. This is the Tudor Black Bay 58 with the navy or blue aluminum bezel insert. Just a really cool timepiece. But people ask, hey, if you're going to buy a wristwatch in future trade desirability and or future potential, again, emphasis on the word potential, future potential price appreciation is of concern, which timepiece or which timepieces would you recommend and why? So I'm going to respond to that question within this video. And again, I want to say before I continue, this is not a recommendation to treat a wristwatch like an investment. And I know some people do and some people have done really well. I'm sharing this information just because, y'all asked, and I want to provide some, again, this is not investment advice. This is just some opinions that I have. Anything can change. Something that's historically been very desirable, potentially something could dive. It could take a nosedive for whatever reason. So with that being said, if you want to purchase a wristwatch, maybe you don't have intentions of becoming a wristwatch collector, but you want to purchase something that'll likely continue to appreciate in value, something that potentially, if you ever needed to trade or sell in the future, potentially that in used condition may be worth more than it was when it was purchased new from the authorized dealer. Which wristwatches would I recommend? And I want to caution everyone, just because a wristwatch brand is mentioned doesn't mean that the wristwatch brand has 100% desirable references. References are models of wristwatches. In the wristwatch community, you refer to a wristwatch model as a wristwatch reference. So one of the brands, and I want to say before I continue as well, that I'm not going to touch upon the high horology brands. I mean, if I did that, I would be going into so many different areas. What I'm going to focus on within this video are very well-respected brands that are, yes, they can be very expensive, but they're not to the level of high horology pieces like Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin. And then you've got a lot of micro brands, and you've got things like FP Journe. I'm not going to go down that road within this video. This is just about the brands that when you think, I want to get a nice wristwatch, I want to get something that historically has performed well on the secondary market or the gray market as far as price appreciation is concerned, what would you recommend? So if budget is of no concern and your local authorized dealer has plenty of stock available, which at least at the time of filming this video, Rolexes are in short supply at the authorized dealers, but I would definitely recommend Rolex. Why would I recommend Rolex? It's not because I think that Rolex is the best wristwatch in the world. A lot of people do. I think it's a very well-made wristwatch. They have excellent marketing. Their marketing has enabled them to let people that even have no desire to even own a wristwatch. Somebody's like, man, my smartphone will tell time and tell me the date, and it'll even talk to me. Why do I want something that may not even have a date on it? Why do I want to put something like that on my wrist? Those people don't even get the wristwatch addiction, the wristwatch hobby. But what they do know, what most of them know, is what a Rolex is. And they're like, oh, Rolex, that's just because of the excellent marketing. Even the people that aren't wristwatch enthusiasts, when they hear the word Rolex, they associate that in their mind, or they probably associate that in their mind as being the best wristwatch in the world, the best status symbol. So Rolex's marketing has enabled them to take their already excellent wristwatches and place them several tiers above in the eyes of consumers or potential consumers just because of the name recognition that's the product of their excellent marketing. The reality is that most any Rolex that someone has purchased has probably gone up in value. Even the one, there's an oddball in the Rolex catalog, it's a Cellini, which is a dress watch. Most of your Rolexes are sports watches, stainless steel sports. But even the Cellini has performed well. Rolex is a weird a weird brand from the perspective that most anything Rolex is probably going to go up in value. You know, I know just from watching the price charts, and you know, if you were going to get a Rolex, you had the funds to get it at retail at an authorized dealer, I wouldn't second guess myself. You know, if you get a Daytona, if you ever had to sell or trade it, as soon as you walked out of the authorized dealer after you had purchased it, you could potentially sell that for a large premium on the gray market, the secondary market. Again, I'm not a flipper. I'm not a wristwatch investor. I'm a wristwatch collector. But this is to respond to viewers that asked, you know, hey, what's the best wristwatch to get if it's something that I felt like I may have to sell or trade in the future? You know, it's a big purchase. So, you know, what should I get? You know, taking that into account. And this could also apply to someone, you know, certain people, they go through a lot of different cars. They go through a lot of whatever hobby or whatever. You know, they get tired of something and they want to trade and they want to experience something new and different. So if you've got that mentality, if that carries on into your wristwatch hobby, then taking into account the potential future trade desirability, the future resale value, that can be very important, a very important part of the purchase decision. But with that being said, I think anything Rolex, you know, Daytona, woo, you know, if you find that in authorized dealer, I would definitely make that the #1 choice. Something more common to find in authorized dealer would be the Submariner, which is still hard to find, at least currently. But Rolex Submariner is arguably the most perfect wristwatch in the world. Highly water resistant, 300 meters, 1,000 feet of water resistance. Just an iconic design. It's got connections with the fictitious character James Bond. Can't go wrong with the Rolex Submariner. And if you look at any of these wristwatches, any of the Rolexes, go to a website like chrono24.com, pull them up, look at the historical price chart, and you'll probably see that for most any Rolex, you'll probably see an upward trend, and that's very unusual. Could the market correct? Could those pre-owned wristwatch prices plummet? Without a doubt. You know, wristwatches should not be treated as an investment. But with that being said, if I was going to confidently add a wristwatch to my collection, there's nothing Rolex that I would steer away from. I personally wouldn't want to get the Cellini, just because when I think of Rolex, I think of stainless steel sports. But I would go with, you know, my #1 would be Daytona. My #2 would be Submariner. My #3 would probably be Rolex GMT. My #4 would probably be Rolex Datejust. And then you've got some other things like the Rolex Oyster Perpetual. You've got the Rolex Milgauss. You've got the Explorer 1, the Explorer 2. Rolex catalog is pretty rich. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to choose from. You've got Yachtmaster. You've got Skydweller, which is a newer Rolex reference. So there's plenty of things to choose from with Rolex. So Rolex would be my #1. My #2 would be Omega. Now, Omega is a great wristwatch. Not quite the marketing that Rolex has, but an outstanding wristwatch. Omega, you need to be careful. Not every Omega reference, again, when you're talking about wristwatches, you refer to them as references instead of like cars where you call them, you know, model. So a wristwatch reference is the specific model of wristwatch from that brand. So Omega, I would be very cautious. But the Omegas that I would feel very comfortable with would be the Omega Seamaster 300M. I would stick with something traditional, you know, something with a blue wave dial. If you can get that, that's the one I've got. Very historic piece. And again, it has connections with James Bond, the fictitious character. Also, if you're wanting to go into the other top tier Omega reference, it would be the Omega Speedmaster. But it would be the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon, the Omega Speedmaster Moon Watch. And there's two that you would want to consider. If you want to get the historically significant piece, go with the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon with Hesalite crystal. It's kind of a plasticky type material instead of a sapphire crystal like you're going to find on the other Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon. But the Hesalite, if you want to be historically accurate with what landed on the moon, you would want to go with Hesalite. But the reality is that either the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon Hesalite or the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon with sapphire crystal. Both of those, again, nothing's guaranteed, but look at the historical charts and see for yourself. Other things Omega makes a lot of highly desirable pieces, but ones that will or may continue to perform well over time, I wouldn't steer beyond those two. You know, if that's your concern, is the potential of future trade-in desirability, future trade-in value, I wouldn't explore Omega beyond those two. But again, Omega has a bunch of fantastic wristwatch references if you're not concerned with the potential future value. But again, that's what this video is all about. Another brand, and a brand you need to be even more careful with, is Breitling. Breitling had its heyday. I mean, it was, Breitling and Rolex were kind of going neck and neck there for a while. And I mean, it's 2022 now. That would probably be back in the early 2000s or so, I would say, where Breitling was really kind of the king. Breitling historically is known for his connection with aviation. The most significant Breitling reference would be the Navi timer. Now again, the Navi timer is not something that a lot of people would look at and really like. It's kind of a larger watch. It's got a lot going on the dial. But it is Breitling's claim to fame. So if you're going to go Breitling, I would definitely steer you towards Navi timer. Breitling has a lot of newer references, one of which is the Super Ocean Heritage 2, and I would stick with the 42 millimeter. That's one of their dive watches. Exceptional, but only get it on the shark mesh bracelet. You can always add a rubber strap or a leather strap aftermarket if you wanted to. But if I was going to go Breitling, I think I would just stick with Navi timer to adhere to what I'm talking about within this video, and that's, you know, something that may have a future trade-in value that could potentially, you know, be more than someone acquired the piece for at the authorized dealer. I mean, again, nothing's guaranteed. But again, Rolex is still king. I would put Omega at number 2. And actually before Breitling, curiously enough, I would put Tudor. I would put Tudor ahead of Breitling. And today on my wrist, I've got the Tudor Black Bay 58. So if you didn't know, Tudor is Rolex's sister brand. Hans Wilsdorf, the guy that invented both Rolex and Tudor, he created Tudor. And not to misquote Mr. Wilsdorf, but in a roundabout way, he said that he was creating a more price-accessible Rolex, and that's why I created Tudor. Now, Tudor today has changed. Tudor today, since Tudor released the Black Bay, and you got to be very careful with Tudor because, put it as politely as I can, Tudor released a lot of very highly undesirable references. But once they created the Black Bay, and especially the Black Bay 58, Tudor's reputation has totally changed. Tudor is now a tool watch that has a vintage type look, an old school type look, but you got new technology, man. This has a 70-hour power reserve. It's highly water resistant, 200 meters, 660 feet. The comfort and the overall aesthetic is, I mean, it's got Rolex DNA flowing throughout it. And that's because Tudor is Rolex's sister brand. So there's nothing wrong with a Tudor, but you can make a lot of mistakes with Tudor. If I was going to get a Tudor, I would stick with the Black Bay 58 because I feel that the original Black Bay, although they look good, if you put it on your wrist, you're probably going to feel that the original Black Bay is a little bit too thick or a little bit too tall on the wrist. And that's not the case with the Black Bay 58. With the Black Bay 58 in 39 millimeter, Tudor really nailed it. The other Tudor I would recommend would be the Tudor Black Bay Chrono. Now the Tudor Black Bay Chrono is a 41 millimeter timepiece, but it's proportionally correct. It's a piece with my 7.5 inch wrist that I wouldn't want the Chrono in the Black Bay 58 size. I originally thought I would until I tried it on, but the Tudor Black Bay Chrono in 41 millimeters, it just works. You know, it being a Chrono with screw down pushers, it just works, it looks good. Everything's proportional. I would definitely steer you towards, in the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, towards the black primary dial, because if you get the white primary dial, which is called the Panda, and the black primary dial, which is referred to as a reverse Panda or inverted Panda, the black primary dial is going to make the hands more legible. The hands on the white dial, Tudor Black Bay Chrono, tend to blend with the dial. So, and again, that's personal preference, but just a few things here. So I think if you stuck anything Rolex is number one, and then number two would be Omega, but with Omega only the Seamaster 300M, preferably the Blue Wave dial, or the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon Hesalite if you want to be historically accurate, or if you want something that can take a little bit more of a beating, the Man on the Moon with sapphire crystal. That's all I would look at Omega. Breitling, the only thing I would consider would be the Navi timer, but I would preference Tudor over Breitling simply because I firmly feel that Tudor is an up and comer, and part of that is linked to the fact that they've been so successful in Black Bay. Obviously they're part of the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, which owns both Rolex and Tudor, and I feel that since they've released Black Bay and also Rolex is continuing to go up market, that it only makes sense that Tudor, in my opinion, will become the more price accessible Rolex. Again, that's my opinion. Tudor doesn't have the track record of performance yet that Rolex has had, but if you look at Tudor since the release of Black Bay several years ago, go to a website like chrono24.com, look at the Tudor Black Bays. Look at the value over time, especially the Tudor Black Bay 58. They seem to be on an upward trend. All of these brands that I just mentioned, if it's not every year, it's often every few years, they do what's called an annual price increase. Sometimes it's all the wristwatch references. Sometimes it's only a few of them. Sometimes the annual price increase percentage varies among references. But Tudor and Rolex are both well known for doing price increases annually. Not every year, but most years, and that helps with in line with this video. Something that may continue to go up in value if it's something that you purchase. Again, nothing's guaranteed, but the fact that these brands historically are known for doing a lot of annual price increases adds to the comfort that possibly. Again, nothing's guaranteed. I keep saying that over and over, but I want to drill that in. That possibly, those timepieces may continue to go up in value. Because they cost more to buy new, it's only natural that the secondary or the gray market prices will likely follow. But before I close out this video, I want to remind everyone, never allow yourself to become sold. It's easy to walk into any authorized dealer. Now, Rolex is an exception because, like I said, pretty much anything Rolex is probably going to be okay. But it would be easy to walk into a Breitling authorized dealer. It would be easy to walk into an Omega authorized dealer. It would be easy to walk into a Tudor authorized dealer and have a salesperson that would try to sell you. These are just my opinions. But after collecting wristwatches for 30 plus years, take it for what it is. Salespeople, they'll try to steer you, and there's different types of salespeople, but a lot of salespeople will often try to steer you towards something that could still be a good watch, but it's not necessarily the best decision. And a lot of that is linked to, oh, well, hey, we've got to sell whatever because it hasn't sold, whatever their reasons may be. So stick with your gut. Look at websites like chrono24.com. Look at the historical price charts. And I'm not saying only look at the wristwatch brands and wristwatch references that I just mentioned. But my best advice would be to look at something with a long history. Something where you can say, okay, well, here's where it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I realize that's not going to be the case with all wristwatch references because not all of them have been in existence for that long. But it's the ones that have been in existence for a long time that you can probably develop a greater sense of comfort if you chose to purchase one of those wristwatches. Again, everything can change. I got a Breitling Super Avenger, which is a newer wristwatch reference, but I got one in 2009. Again, I'm not a flipper. I'm not a wristwatch investor. But when I purchased that from the authorized dealer in 2009, and then the values a few years after that, it more than doubled in value from what I paid for it. But then it started to dive a little bit. But it's still, if I had to sell or trade in used condition, it's still in used condition valued at more than I paid for it brand new at the authorized dealer. So, all wristwatches can perform differently, and there's some that can just take a total dive. And an example of that, and this isn't one I would recommend, but it's still a fantastic wristwatch. Panerai. Panerai had a bunch of hype associated with them several years ago. Panerai took a dive. And part of that, in my opinion, was due to the fact that they released too many limited editions, and then also due to the fact that they were a larger wristwatch, predominantly larger. Panerai was predominantly larger, and the larger wristwatch trend, at least currently, has kind of fizzled out. Now, that could rebound, and for that reason, and not the reason I got it, again, I'm not a wristwatch investor or flipper, but I got the Panerai PAM 112. Great example of a Panerai. It's manual wind, it's got an exhibition case back, doesn't even have a seconds hand, but the lume on it is incredible. It's got the sandwich dial. With Panerai, you can use a little screwdriver and change the straps. You can make it look different every day. Fantastic timepiece, but it's not one that I would recommend. Although that one, since I purchased it, I always negotiate a discount or I don't buy. But since I purchased it, if I did have to sell or trade, I would either break even or maybe make a few $100 in used condition. But that's one of the core Panerai references, one of the core Panerai Luminor references, the PAM 112, and it's one that's still highly desirable, even though Panerai as a whole kind of took a nosedive. But you got to be careful, and again, none of this is considered a recommendation to buy a wristwatch. I mean, this is something that, market conditions can always change, and something that was a dog today could be hot tomorrow. I mean, you never know. Prime example of that, and again, pretty much everything Rolex is good. But if you look at the Rolex Hulk, the Rolex Submariner with the green bezel, with ceramic green bezel, when that came out, it would sit in the authorized dealers. People didn't want it. And now it's one of the hottest wristwatches in the Submariner line. Things can change. So, again, these are just my opinions. I hope this video helped. I encourage you to ask below if you have any questions, because I'm always looking for future topics we're always looking for questions to respond to within future timepieces for tomorrow videos. And again, this video was prompted by questions from several viewers, and I just wanted to keep it simple. I didn't mention any of the high horology brands within this, but I did mention very well made, highly respected Swiss watch brands that I think that, if you chose to go this route, you probably wouldn't find yourself in a world of hurt. But again, there's no guarantees. There's never any guarantees. But most importantly, something you could put on your wrist and enjoy and feel like you made a wise purchase decision. So with that being said, be sure to check out the Timepieces for Tomorrow merchandise. I've got it linked below within this video's description. I've got sweatshirts like this one, t-shirts. I've got coffee mugs, pint glasses. Should be using a pint glass for my beer. I'm just drinking out of the can, man. But yeah, pint glasses, stickers, and a whole lot more. So that's a great way to show your support. Help to support videos like this one. And then also be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that bell icon, and that'll notify you whenever I post another video. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, Captain Irix Guy here. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to subscribe. It's youtube.com/Irix Guy. And ring that bell icon when you do to be notified whenever I post another video. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day.